Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the number one and only Silencing of Stigma podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Kirshner. Along with us today on this episode will be my mother, Kathy Kirshner, and my dad, Joe Kirshner. But today we have a special guest, and that is Gina. Gina was on a previous episode with one of her daughters, Jackie, and her best friend, and we talk about their struggles with addiction. But also on that podcast, for those of you who have not listened to that podcast, she mentioned that she had another daughter who didn't quite make it through addiction. And Gina is here with us today to share her daughter's story on how she lost her battle to addiction. So with that said, welcome to Silencing a Stigma podcast. I hope you enjoy. I'm out. Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to a podcast. Not only is this a podcast, but it's our journey. A journey that we hope you want to ride out with us, as we intend to educate you guys, inspire, talk about past and current experiences, and to make one thing: to stop judging others. Most importantly, stop judging yourself based on others' views and perceptions. With that said, you'll be hearing from me, myself, Austin Kirshner, but along with our journey on this podcast will be my mother, Kathy Kirshner, and my brother, Dylan Kirshner. With that said, welcome to Silencing of Stigma. We're going back to the roots.
My daughter Steph, she passed away November 4th, 2018, and it was a cocaine fentanyl overdose. I didn't really know that she had the addiction problem that she did. She had mental health problems her entire life. So she was 34 when she passed away. And when she was a baby, she was like one of the most beautiful babies ever. I mean, everybody would comment about how beautiful she was. Just dark brown eyes, jet black hair, just a really gorgeous baby and full of energy. I mean, this child just had so much energy. And probably when she was about 4, like she might have been 3 years old. I have a picture of her running away from home. Like she was already, she had her boundaries. We lived in the city at the time, and I had a tree up the road, set of bushes at the neighbor's house. And I remember her in her little suitcase, and she's toddling out, and she's running away from home. And I told her, I said, you can run away if you want, but you can't go past those bushes down there. And she went all the way to the bushes, and she turned around, and she just stared at me for the longest time, and then she came back, So it was the one time that she listened to me, and she didn't. She finally decided she was going to listen to me, but she was a challenge. She was a challenged child, and I remember when she was 8, she used to have temper tantrums, and they were really severe temper tantrums. As she started getting a little older, her temper tantrums got to the point where she was pulling dressers over. She would get grounded. I'd put her up in her room. She would pull dressers over. She would just terrorize everything. I mean, even backtracking, I remember putting her in preschool, and she would get in trouble for having toothpaste parties. She would gather all the little kids around, and she would have toothpaste parties. And they said, we cannot have toothpaste parties. We don't want the children eating toothpaste. I'm like, okay.
That's what toothpaste parties were.
Yeah, they would all gather all these little kids back in the cubby, and Stephanie would put all the little toothpaste on their fingers, and they'd be sitting back there eating toothpaste.
What?
Yeah, she was always into something. When she was 8, she started having more severe temper tantrums at home, but in school, she was perfect. Like, she did nothing wrong in school. And I'm thinking, something's not right here. How can she be so disruptive at home? I would lay in bed with her at night when she was little, and I would ask her, we'd talk about her day, and, why did you have the toothpaste parties? Why did you write on the wall? Why did, whatever the situation was. And she used to tell me because the voices told her to.
Really?
Yeah. And, back then it was just weird. You're like, oh, okay. You would joke. Like I used to joke, and it wasn't funny. And I think back on it now, and I'm like, I can't believe I would joke to my friends, but I'm like, I look for a 666 on this child's skull sometimes,
Okay.
It was like it was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with her behavior. I remember telling my ex-husband when she was 8, we need to get her in somewhere. She started getting set out of the classroom. She started at 8 years old where manifested itself into the classroom, where they told me that they thought that she had ADHD. So I decided to try to get her some help. And we're talking 30 years ago. And 30 years ago was nothing. I mean, we need a lot of help still to this day.
Yeah.
But 30 years ago, they didn't know anything. This child, from the time she was 8 until she was 15, was put on every type of medication imaginable. They had her on Valium. They had her on, I don't even remember, had the Klonopin and just any type of anti-anxiety medication. Ritalin was the first thing that they put her on. I remember them trying to put her into, it was a Susquehanna Counseling at the time. I'm not sure. I think they were taken over by somebody, but Susquehanna Counseling decided they were going to put her in a group. And it was a group of all adult men who were addicts. And and she was 12 years old at the time.
Wow.
And this was the group that they wanted her to attend. And I remember going up to them and said, "You are not putting my 12-year-old daughter in this group. Like, what is wrong with you?" But they didn't know what to do with them back then. It was a battle. And I've always been one of those that tried to stay on top of everything. So that's all I spent my life doing, is trying to stay on top of everything.
So ADHD, these men were drug addicts?
They were using, and I don't know what they were using, but it was an addict support group. And
that's really strange. They couldn't find one for
for children. They didn't have anything back then. I guess they just didn't know where to put her. You know, they're what do you do with someone who, you know, she was at 12, she was starting to try to run away. She was starting to get into drinking. She was, you know,
at 12.
At 12, yeah. She, I mean, there was just so many stories. Like I remember her. She was maybe 13, and she had a whole bunch of kids out. We lived on Atlantic Avenue in York, and she had a bunch of her friends outside. And I remember telling her, I don't know how many times, that it was time to come in. It was getting late. She didn't want to listen to me, so I walked out, and she was laying on the sidewalk, and I started walking on her. Like, I got on her, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm walking all over you like you walk all over me."
Oh, gosh.
Really?
So, and she always remembered that. Like, she brought that up, you know, as she got older. But I was like, I never knew what to do with you. You know, it was just one of those, it didn't matter what discipline, whether she was spanked, because back then you didn't have the controversy of spanking. You know, she was grounded all the time. She started self-cutting. She started self-mutilating in Smith. So she would have been probably 12 or 13. I mean, things started really getting bad right as she hit about 13 years old, because she started running away. She was put in emotional support up at Edgar Falls Smith. She would get suspended several times. I don't remember how many times I was called to the school because she would carve the word bitch into her arm. She just self-mutilated herself. And they would call me and say, you know, "We found her with a razor blade, so this is considered a weapon." And it was a weapon against herself. She wasn't using it on anybody else. She's using it against herself. So they had her in emotional support class. And this went on for years.
And she's doing this all because of the voices in her head are telling her to do it.
I guess so.
That's what she told you guys?
That's what she told me when she was younger. It was the voices in her head. Like, I can't remember how everything ended up. She ended up going when she was 16 or 17. She also tried to commit suicide a couple times. She took overdose of pills 2 or 3 times. I'm thinking the third time was when they actually told me at the hospital that they weren't going to send her home. They needed to send her somewhere else. So we came up with Foundations, which I think is in Doylestown. And she went to Foundations for 1.5 years. And you know, that seemed to help. And she got out, and she was back and forth between her dad and me. But her behavior just never changed. Like, she just went back to this negative behavior all the time.
Did she act like that for her dad?
Yeah, she acted like this for everybody. Stephanie was not, you know, it's tough because now that I've lost her, you know, I would give anything to be arguing with her. You know, I mean, she and I had a love-hate relationship, like literally love-hate relationship. And it was more on her side. She either loved me or she hated me. I think I was more on the love side at the time she died. At least I hope so. We were actually getting along, but we've had some pretty knockdown, drag-out fights. And she always blamed me for the fact that she went to Foundation. She didn't blame herself. She didn't look at the fact that we couldn't control her anymore, that she wasn't following the rules, that she tried to kill herself with pills. And And again, I was never thinking this was an addiction. Like, it was just all mental health to me, that she hadn't officially been diagnosed with bipolar. I think eventually she was. But the funny thing was that I always thought she'd grow out of it. That was my mindset. She's going to grow out of this. She's going to grow up, and she's going to grow out of this. And I think in some ways she did. I didn't realize how many different drugs she used. I think she supplemented alcohol. I think a lot of her problem was alcohol for many years. She had, I was going to jump all over the place. She has a 16-year-old daughter. So I think she was okay. I mean, I don't remember her really having a lot of alcohol problems back when she had her child, her oldest. She had 4 children. So the oldest is 16 and the youngest is going to be 8. And I don't see her 2 daughters. I see her her youngest. I'm really messed up now. She has a 16-year-old, a 12-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old.
Okay.
So the 5-year-old I see, the 2 girls, the 8 and 12, I don't see. And I don't see her oldest child either. Mainly just because she's not interested. Since her mom passed away, she just kind of has isolated herself from the family. So it's a family disease.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
and everybody handles it differently.
Did she have, going through all these hard times in her life, did she have friends, like close group friends that she hung out with or anybody like that?
Stephanie always had friends. Now, there weren't always the same friends.
So they're constantly changing.
She constantly changed. I remember when she was younger saying to her, you know, you're going to continue to treat this person this way and they're going to alienate you. One of these days, you're not going to have anybody there for you because of the way you're treating them.
Yeah.
So she was very easy to attract friends, very difficult to hold on to them.
Did they reflect her in any way as far as their way of handling their lives and the things they got into? Were they common or no?
Yeah, I get, you mean were her friends just like they
Like
weren't
her?
really like, I don't know. I mean, that's hard when you say like her, because I don't know.
Did they have the same tendencies that she had?
I don't think so. I mean, her tendency started so young, and so
Yeah.
I didn't really see the same behavior. I mean, there was a time when I had quit work full time to go to college. Basically, I was getting laid off, and so I ended up going to college full time, and I babysat part time. And the kids that I would babysit, you know, Stephanie was jealous of the kids that I would babysit, and I remember her just getting in trouble all the time. And I mean, she would grab a knife and run around the dining room table, and I'd run one way and she'd run the other way, and I'd have to shove a table in the corner to block her so that I could get the knife out of her hands because she's threatening to hurt herself. You know, she had no filter and she had no boundaries with herself. She was just always on edge.
Always wanting to harm herself.
Always
and not
wanting
others.
to harm herself.
Was it for attention though?
I thought so.
Because she was jealous of like you just said, the way you
Yeah.
babysat these certain kids, like you treated them maybe a little differently just because they weren't your kids.
I think when you're bipolar, you know, and I don't totally understand the bipolar disease. I probably need to do even more research on that. But I think with bipolar, you know, you're manic or depressive. You know, it's constant up and down. And, you know, I used to watch her Facebook as she got older, and you could always tell if she was manic or depressed by her Facebook. You know, I love him. Now he's the worst thing in the world. Let's everybody, you know, hate him. I love my mom. No, she's the worst thing in the world. You know, it's just, you just never knew.
There was no balance.
There was no balance. I mean, people in the family were always just like, you know, you feel like you're on a roller coaster or a trampoline with Steph. You know, it's just like she's up and down constantly. She was exhausting. She was the type of child that would walk into the room, and when she walked out, even as a young adult, she walked out of the room, you're like, phew. You know, you just could breathe because that's how she was. But yet she would give anybody anything. She would do anything for anybody. She was the most creative person. When Jackie was pregnant with Hunter, Stephanie created all of the decorations. I can't even begin to tell you what she did. I have pictures of Jackie's baby shower with Hunter that Stephanie just did so much that I was like, I can't believe, like, she just Pinterested everything, and just, you know, I was like, you should be like in craft shows or something, the things that you can do. And she just never felt good enough, I think, was her issue. She never felt good enough. The only time that she felt she accomplished anything, and I think this surprised everybody in the family, she decided she was going to go in the service. She had gotten pregnant with her her daughter, who's going to be 13 in August, and she came to me, and she was going to get married to this guy that, you know, I don't even want to say anything, but she was going to get married to this guy. He's the reason I don't see my granddaughters now. But she told me she was getting married. She also told me she was going to go in the service. She was going to take a test to go in the service. And everybody was like, there's no way. There's no way she's going to make it in the service. She can't listen to authority anywhere. And I'm thinking, but it's structured.
Yep.
And structure for her is probably one of the best things. If she can get past the test, if she can get past, you know, whatever is going to be in front of her, she will do really good.
Yep.
And she did. She passed the test. She had to give up the rights to her oldest child because she was not married. And if you weren't married, she wasn't married to the father. And if you weren't married, you had to turn the rights over when you went into the military, which if you're the father, you don't have to do that. If you're the mother, you do, which I find to be a problem.
That's the first time I ever heard that.
She had to give her rights up to her oldest, I would say child, but yeah, her oldest child. So she did, and then she married her daughter's father. She married this guy so that she didn't have to turn over the rights because her little girl was 3 when she went into the military. Okay. So she said she was doing this for her kids, that she wanted to do something for her children. So she passed the test. She ended up doing, what was her MOS? It was, she was the fuel person. She was like tanking all of she was on the Theodore Roosevelt. So she was on the Theodore Roosevelt. She joined the Navy. She was on the Theodore Roosevelt. She was deployed over to Dubai several times. She got to go to Italy. Like, there were some really cool things. Yeah. But the entire time that she was in the military, her ex-husband was controlling everything. He wouldn't allow her to have money. He wouldn't allow her, you know, he controlled the bank account. He wouldn't give her anything. So she's overseas, and he's trying to be abusive back here in the States. So that caused a lot of problems. And long story short, she didn't make the entire 4 years in the military. It was like 3 years and 7 months, but enough for her to get her military benefits, thank God. Mm-hmm. She did get her military benefits, and she did get discharged. I guess it was a general discharge for medical. She had some issues while she was in the military, plus all of the abuse that was going on. The military doesn't stand for that either. Yeah. So there were some issues there.
But does the military help with those issues, or do they just tell you have to leave?
They try to help,
okay.
But you know, she claims she was raped in the military. I don't know. You know, that's, you know, she did end up with full, what do they call the disability, military disability. So she did get full disability. She fought for that. She got that. But of course, she had all of her children at this time, and when she got her disability, she was using that money for drugs. Okay. I know when she first, I didn't realize that at the time, but Jackie had actually told me that I think Steph had gotten something like $11,000 or something, and the majority of it went on drugs. Wow. Which just shocks me, mm-hmm. you know, to think what she could have done with that money.
They spend a lot of money on that. And in her case, she's had mental health issues since a little girl. Yeah. Goes into service, and now on top of that, she's fighting addiction. Yeah. That's a lot.
Yeah. She had the alcohol problem. You know, she never ended up in jail, surprisingly. And that's few and far between. You know, most addicts do, and I think
we learned that with the last one.
Yeah. Yeah, most addicts end up in jail, and she did not end up in jail. She did have CYS involved with her kids. You know, they would come and drug test her. When she died, it was cocaine mixed with fentanyl, THC. So it was, you know, she was always smoking marijuana. That was like big. And I did know that, mm-hmm. And I think we talked in one of the other podcasts, you know, I have mixed feelings about that. I don't know if it was okay for her, if it wasn't okay for her. I think if it would have been the only thing that she would have done, I would have been okay with that. But I don't think that was enough for her. So she was, you know, doing crack and cocaine. It was cocaine mixed with fentanyl. And she had only been to rehab once. Jackie had actually told her sister that she had a problem. I don't know what convinced her to go to rehab, but she did. And she came out and just full force into getting involved in NA. She became, she had the key to one of the rooms. She would open up. She was helping people. She was helping on the race project. She was doing awesome. And then just, I don't know, just like that, she just relapsed. And I had no idea that she had relapsed and had been using again. So it was a shocker when she died.
Yeah.
Do you know how long she was using from the relapse?
Probably a couple months.
Okay.
I think it had been a couple months. It might have been longer. I don't know. And I don't really have anybody to really ask, with her. Her situation was kind of, she never talked about it, whereas with Jackie, she's very open with me. So I knew a lot about what was going on with Jackie. I didn't know a lot about what was going on with Steph. In hindsight, she ghosted me. She stopped calling me. Her birthday was in October. We had scheduled to go out for dinner. And she told me that she couldn't make it and something had come up on my end. And I said, I was in the middle of a project with work and I was supposed to travel to Nebraska. So I said, when I get back from Nebraska the first weekend, we'll go out for dinner. And so she said, okay, we'll do that. And I came back on Friday, and that Friday was the day she had died. So we never had the opportunity to go out for dinner. I know it wasn't something, even with all of her suicide attempts, I know it wasn't something that she intended to do. I think Steph felt she was invincible. I don't think it was something that she ever thought was going to happen. She was very envious of her sister. I don't know why. I think Jackie mentioned that in the podcast that she couldn't figure out why Steph wanted to be like her.
Jackie's younger than.
Jackie's younger,
Steph.
yeah. 7 years younger.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think because Jackie and I were so close and Steph and I never developed that closeness, that I think she just felt that maybe if she was just like her sister, that closeness would be there. The difference was, while Jackie was still doing all of the things that Jackie was doing, Jackie always respected me and she always treated me differently, where Steph, I just never knew what her mood was going to be. And if I said the wrong thing, we were done. It was, she's screamed at me and yelled at me. And, we just had some really, really bad fights. So it was tough when she passed because, you always think that you're going to deal with it at a later date.
Dad, can you relate? Can you relate to that as far as with Kyle passing and stuff like that? I mean, I know you guys. I witnessed some pretty bad arguments you guys had and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In which things were different, and you, like she said, feel like you always were able to deal with it at a later date, but then you really don't get that chance to.
No. I do want to ask you back to the military. Did you think that she came out of the military doing better, or do you think it was worse, maybe because of what she experienced in the military?
I think that she felt like she accomplished something. So I think from a personal standpoint, I feel like she felt, thank you. She felt like she did something, and I know she wanted to finish. Like, she really thought that, being in the military was a great accomplishment. And, I had some backlash when she was buried because I buried her in a military uniform. And, it wasn't, when I think back on it, she didn't look like herself, when we, in the casket, she just didn't look like herself. But I always knew that was her greatest accomplishment in life, was being in the military. Exactly. That was something that she did. And I felt that it was an honor to her to bury her in her dress uniform. So, but I think because of what she went through in the military, and her ex-husband, he was abusive. He was very abusive. They were abusive to each other. I'm not going to make it seem like Steph was, because Steph was, she was a force to be reckoned with. And I said that, I could not do any type of eulogy. I had to have the pastor actually read something, but I said, she was a force to be reckoned with. She was, you knew she was in the room. Like, you felt her energy, whether it was negative or positive. You felt it when she was in the room. But I think with the military, I think her drinking, it increased. Yeah. I think with the abuse that she was going through, she wasn't feeling validated. She wasn't feeling loved. Her ex-husband, like I said, there was a lot of abuse. I remember they lived in Virginia Beach, and I went down to Virginia Beach, and you were actually allowed to take, you could transport. I have a carry permit, so you were allowed to transport into Virginia Beach. And I remember going down there and carrying. And my husband was alive at the time, and he's like, are you going to be prepared to use that if you have to? I said, if I have to, I will, because this guy is not going to be abusive to me, and he's not going to abuse my daughter. So, of course, never came to that, but I was prepared. It was a very abusive relationship. And, he pushed her to, she ended up with this huge cut on her hand. He pushed her hand through a glass door. And she beat up his car and smashed his windows. And, it was a very volatile situation. It was horrible. And he ended up with the upper hand because he has both the girls, and we can't see them. They weren't even allowed at their mother's funeral. They were allowed 1 hour for a viewing. And we hadn't seen them 2 years prior to Steph's death. So Steph had seen them. She had been going down to some place in Maryland. She had supervised visits that she was allowed to go and visit the girls because he was trying to claim all kinds of stuff. He filed physical abuse against her, and she was cleared in PA, but PA and Maryland don't talk to each other. He tried to file sexual abuse against her boyfriend, and he was cleared. Just anything that he could to keep the girls away from her. So, that was tough. And I think that all of that played a role in her spiraling downwards. She just felt hopeless. She felt like it didn't matter what she did. Nothing was gonna get better for her.
It's almost like it seemed like she didn't have that purpose.
She didn't feel like she did, and I think it was something else that I had said, when she passed. And, I feel like her purpose, she was an organ donor, and I feel that was her purpose.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, she was able to give. So.
Back to, you said she would give anything to help anyone. I think that goes back to, like, she knows how that feels. And I know we talked about that before. If you know how that feels to, I don't know, what she felt, that loss, or she didn't have that purpose, she's willing to put that out there and be kind to other people because she knows how that feels. She doesn't want other people to feel that same way. So that's kind of like what she was doing in a sense of helping a lot of other different people so they won't feel the way she felt.
I know that Jackie and her got very close. Unfortunately, they got close in addiction is what ended up happening. And I didn't realize that. Like, I knew that they hung out together, but I never realized what they were doing when they were together. I don't know. I just always hoped that they would have this good sister relationship. And they did. They also had a love-hate relationship. Jackie had mentioned Steph stole. Steph stole from everybody, She just felt that if she wanted it, it belonged to her. So it was just her way of thinking. She didn't care. She really didn't care. When Jackie had been arrested, Steph went and took all of Jackie's things, and they were living in the same house, and she kind of took them. Well, Steph had kind of moved in after Jackie was in jail, and Jackie comes out and she's looking for all her stuff. And, even to this day, I'm sure that if Jackie goes through any of Steph's things, it's going to be like, well, this was mine. This was mine. This was mine. So that's just kind of the relationship they had. And I know Jackie struggles, because that was her big sister. And I would have been really happy to see both of them get their lives together, and be able to be successful. Steph just didn't know what that meant. She didn't want to work. She was handed all this disability, and what do you do with it? And instead of being productive, she used it to buy drugs, and and she paid the ultimate cost because of it.
Yeah, it's crazy that it was just voices in her head.
It was voices in her head, and she actually has a tattoo. She had a tattoo on her arm. I don't remember which one it was. And it was this I always called it a fairy. It was this weird looking man. I don't know, but she said it's what she saw. It was, she had a tattoo of what she would see. She would see these images of these little fairy men.
She told you this?
She told me that. And she had the tattoo. Because when she first started getting tattoos, I was like, why are you getting tattoos? And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, I didn't want her to self-mutilate. So if she can turn that pain that she has into something artistic, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
You know, so she would get all kinds of tattoos, and you know, and they were okay. I mean, I'm not big into girls having, you know, Jackie wants a whole sleeve, you know. I'm not into all of that stuff, but you know, whatever. If that's what they want to do, then that's fine. It's a lot better than her, you know, mutilating her own body.
Right.
And she had a story for each tattoo?
She had a story for each tattoo. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Our family also suffers with mental health issues. I have a family member who had similar things like that.
Bipolar's tough. The whole manic depressive is, you don't know when they're manic, it's kind of great, but they go overboard, you know. It's like you like because they're up and they're happy and everything's just wonderful, you know, and like I said, they walk out of the room and you're like, whoa, you know, where did that come from? But then the depressive state just takes over, and you know, she wouldn't answer her phone. I mean, that was part of one of the things that Jackie and I dealt with, because I mean, we were 5 minutes away from her. We were 5 minutes down the road, and we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know that she had used these drugs. We didn't know. I still, to this day, do not know how long she was down, but she was able to donate her organs, and they worked on her for 2 hours. So I'm guessing that it hadn't been that awful long before she was found. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But Jackie called her at 2, and she was found at 6. And she never answered the phone at 2 o'clock.
Okay.
So, but I'm pretty sure she couldn't have been down from 2 to 6, because I don't think that she would have been able to donate her organs, I think,
Yeah, I don't know
if
how
she had
that
been
works.
down that long.
So when the ambulance came, she was breathing or no?
She was gurgling.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know when we got to the emergency room, because I think I mentioned this before, but I know that it wasn't that I didn't take it seriously. It's that these things just, when you have a child that every time you turn around something like this is happening, whether it's not necessarily an overdose, but just going to the hospital or something serious. And, you know, Steph would say, this is life-threatening and this is horrible. And then you go to the hospital and it's not, you know. So it was like the little boy that cried wolf all the time with her. And so when I got the phone call from her boyfriend, you know, I said to him, do I need, and I had Jackie's son, you know, so I was like babysitting him. I had just gotten back from Nebraska. And I said, do you need me to come out there? Is that something that you can go to the hospital and then call me when you get there and let me know what's going on? And it was just the way he said, no, Gina, they said to call the parents, you need to go to the hospital. So I was like, okay, I know what this is about. So, you know, you get there but you know, you go to that great station, give them your name, and then they're like, well, let's get somebody else to come and talk to you. So I'm like, okay. That's the second flag. And then they walk you down the hall to that room. And I'm like...
What's your thoughts going through your head at this point?
I knew she was gone.
So
I knew she was gone. I was walking... The last time I had been in that room, you know, my brother had passed away. Now, he had... we'll never know what he died from either. He was the same age as Steph. He was 34 years old when he died. He died in 2003, and he had been drinking with some friends, and he fell. The only story we know is that he fell. He was going up the basement steps, and he fell backwards and suffered major head trauma. We don't know if he was drunk. We don't know if he was pushed. We never got the story on that. But I remember going to that room, and I remember being told, you know, that he wasn't with us any longer. And so you see that in the movies, you know, they always have that special room. But as I'm walking towards that room, I'm thinking, and I stopped before we got to the room. The nurse was with me, and I said, I'm not sure I really want to go in there. And she said, do you want to wait? And I said, no, I know it's coming, but, you know, I'll go in. And the thing was, I didn't hear what I thought I was going to hear, because they had her hooked up to tubes, and they said that they weren't recognizing any brain activity, but they have special things that they have to go through in order to register the brain activity. They can't just claim somebody as brain dead right away. So, you know, they said, we're going to just keep her hooked up and we're going to see what happens. And so this was Friday, and she was officially declared on Monday. So
So you had to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally different than what we had to deal with.
Jackie spoke a little bit about it, and she said it's still a hot topic between the two of you.
She's angry. She believes that Steph would have come back. She believes that miracles can happen. And I'm not saying that I don't believe that miracles can happen, but I'm also, as much as I have a higher power and I believe in the higher power, I also believe that, I believe in the science, and I believe that, our higher power and God has given the ability to certain people to be educated enough to make that decision. Yes, they make mistakes. We all make mistakes in the world, but there was zero response and there was no energy. And I said Steph exerted energy everywhere she went, even in a coma, even in death. There should be energy. And there was no energy in that room. Her brother walked in and said that. He said, "I don't feel her here." And I said, "I know, I don't either." So I feel that she left us on Friday, but was able to save other people. So we kept her hooked up. Her dad was in Jamaica at the time. So we had to try to get a hold of him. He was supposed to be there for an anniversary. So we're trying to get a hold of him in Jamaica. We couldn't do anything until he got there. So we had to wait. He finally flew in Saturday night, I think. He did not want to take her off. I mean, I had to be the voice of reason. Jackie was angry. She flew out of the room. We had the gift of life come in to talk to us. We had the doctors come in. They said, there's no activity. Her brainstem had been severed and there was no activity. I knew what that meant.
Was Jackie there for that?
Jackie was there.
So she was pissed off?
Jackie is still pissed off.
Is she?
Yeah.
She shared that with me. I tried to help her. My mom was on life support, and it's a hot topic in our family because they don't want to be on life support.
Right.
And I always tell Joe, well, you're going to be on there as long as I need you to be on there. But my mom, the same thing. They said there was no activity, and I just prayed on it and thought, you know what, if they take her off and she's breathing, then God still wants her here. But she didn't, and so at that point we knew as well.
Yeah, it was just... It was tough, and it was even tough for me in the hospital because I'm probably more of an emotional person nowadays than what I ever was in my life. But I'm not overly emotional. I'm very, I think that's why I asked about signs the last time. Like, I'm a Capricorn, and Capricorn's just stoic, Capricorn just pushes through, type A personality, that's me. And, I'm the one that will coordinate everything when somebody dies. I coordinate the funerals. I handle everything. I do my breaking down in private, and I handle everything.
That's her.
In front of everybody.
I'm not Capricorn now.
But it's okay. But, that's what I do. I just push through. And it comes across cold. It comes across as though I'm uncaring because I can do this.
Right.
And I felt like I wasn't... you read these stories and you see these stories of the mother's devastation of losing their child. I was devastated that I lost my daughter, but I also had another daughter who was suffering, and I had my daughter's children who were suffering, and nobody was believing me that, before we even took her off the life support. I mean, I had to say, her dad sat there and he said, "Well, I just want more time. I just, I don't want to take her off now. I just want more time with her." And I said, "Scott, if you do that, then she's not going to be able to give her organs. There's a window of opportunity for her to give her organs and give life to somebody else, and we need to give Steph's life purpose, and we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to remove her from the life support and give somebody else the opportunity to live." And I know it upset him, and I know Jackie was angry, but I still feel it was the right thing. It was unfortunate. She had given her heart, both her lungs, her kidney, and her liver. And the left lung recipient and the heart recipient both passed away. I don't know how long they lived, but I wrote a letter to each.
I was just going to ask you, do they let you know?
I wrote a letter. There's a process that you have to go through. So I did write a letter to the Gift of Life and submitted it to all of the recipients, dear liver recipient, dear heart recipient, dear kidney recipient. The heart recipient was the hardest one because before she passed, before we took her off the life support, they gave us the heartbeat, the chart. So we had that. We all got to listen to her heart before we removed her off the life support. And I wanted to listen to that heart again. Like, I wanted to be able...
She has me crying. Don't look at me.
I can't look at you. So,
So you reached out to him?
I did. So the right lung recipient, they are in touch with me.
Are they?
So yeah, they're in touch with me. They sent cards. Matter of fact, I owe them a letter. You know, I might have scared them off. I think my last letter was like, I'd love to meet them. Like, we exchanged pictures. But,
Yeah.
you know, meeting somebody, it's tough. It's tough for the recipients, too, because they are, you know, they're grateful for the life that they've been given, but they know it's at the expense of somebody else.
Yeah.
So.
And I've seen videos where like the couples, or before the wedding and stuff like that, they would bring the person that gave the heart. It was a brother or something like that, and it's just like you said, it's hard for them too, because it's at the risk of somebody else's life. So.
Yep. I mean, I think it was the kidney. I think the girl that got the kidney got the liver too. I think, if I have that right. I have a letter stating, you know, the ages and gender of everybody. But, you know, she only responded through Gift of Life and said, I don't know what to say. I'm grateful. I'm sorry for her loss. I'm grateful for my second chance. And that was about all that she could say.
Yeah.
You know, and I appreciate that.
I mean, what do you say? Like, you really, there's not much.
There's nothing, you know. I just know that, you know, part of my daughter still lives on, you know. I mean,
Exactly.
you know, she's still here, you know, and she's in Pennsylvania. So somewhere,
pretty cool.
Somewhere in Pennsylvania, you know, there's, you know, the left lung wasn't in the greatest condition. So that had gone to a 76-year-old gentleman. And that kind of surprised me when they said it was a 76-year-old man. I'm thinking, I mean, not that I want to, you know, because I hope somebody gives me a chance at life at 76. You know, I don't want to be counted. But it did shock me, you know, because you kind of think of the younger ones being given the chance. But he didn't make it. But I know that she extended his life a little bit, so that maybe his family got some closure with him.
Exactly.
You know, and same way with the heart. The heart's a tough organ.
Yeah,
you know, it's tough. So I don't know if it was rejected. I don't know. You know, I don't know at what point or how long the heart recipient lived. I just know that I reached out to them. It had been quite a while since I heard anything, and then Gift of Life had actually sent me a letter saying, you know, we're sorry to inform you that the heart recipient, you know, they responded and said that he passed away.
Yeah, I was curious if they keep in touch with you.
Yeah.
What about you, Dad? You want anybody else's organs?
Guess if I have to, yeah.
I'm an organ donor. I'm definitely an advocate for organ donor. You know, I believe that if you are healthy enough to be able to donate your organs, you should. You know, you should give somebody else. What are you going to do with them? You know, if you're gone, you have no use for them.
You got a point.
I'm an organ donor. My mother was an organ donor. Unfortunately, her body shut down and she really didn't have anything to give. But I was a little bit weirded out by how it worked. I guess in Steph's case, she was already on life support. So my mom was on life support, and they asked us, they didn't think that she had any organs that she could donate, but that they would have to keep her on life support, even though they officially said that she was gone. They would not take her to the morgue. They would keep her alive until and I could not handle that.
Yeah,
That's tough.
That was the hardest thing. And I said, okay, well, you don't think her organs are good enough, so let's not do that. Like, I freaked out at that moment. I'm like, I can't leave this hospital knowing that she's technically still on life support because of that reason. And I think it was like a day or something that they had to keep them on to figure it out. And I was very selfish at that point. And I was like, well, you said she's probably not. She had dialysis. She had kidney failure. She ended up getting sepsis, and that attacks your organs. And so I was like, no, I was very selfish, but I was shocked that they have to keep to do that. And I understand that now, but I was like, I can't do that. And so I am an organ donor, and I think you're an organ donor.
Yeah.
I'm not.
You should be.
I remember getting my license done, and it was when I was younger, and they're like, you want to be an organ donor? And I was like, I don't even know what that means. I'm not one, but yeah, I should be.
You can still do that.
When do they determine the time of death then? Is it because if they hold them for 2 extra days just to get their organs to stay?
I don't know. As soon as they told me that, I was like, no, we can't do that.
So you guys,
they had to harvest her organs. So I don't know. I don't think they declare her until they remove her from life. Well, she's on the life support, I'm thinking, because they wheeled her down to the room to harvest her organs. We all said goodbye right before she went into the operating room. So they probably declared her after they took her after they removed the life support. I would assume they took her organs, removed her from the life support, and then declared her at that time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's a tough process.
Yeah, I hate to say, but we had it easy compared to you. I mean, we didn't have to go through any of that stuff.
Well, and it was tough, and it was, unfortunately, she was on the same floor as my husband was. I had to take my husband off of life support too, so he was like.
So let's backtrack. He passed away soon before Steph?
He passed away in October of 2016, so 2 years prior. He was severely diabetic, and like I had in 2016, I mentioned I lost my aunt, my mom, and my husband. I was taking care of my aunt for several years, and that's another branch of my story because I've been alienated from some of my family members due to greed, basically, because my aunt was wealthy and I took care of her, and they believed that they tried to file abuse charges against me, financial abuse, just all these crazy things that you can't believe family did to you. But a lot of that started with Jackie's addiction problem that she had before because Jackie took care of my aunt, and so there was like a lot of bad family dynamics going on about the time I found out that Jackie had an addiction problem, and I took my aunt to take care of her. So I put my aunt in a home, and she ended up passing. I put her in home in July of 2013. She ended up passing in July of 2016. July 23rd, 2016, my aunt passed away. So then my husband, who was severely diabetic, had been in the hospital. It was like every other month he was in the hospital. I mean, it got to the point he had bilateral amputations on both of his feet. He worked at Harley-Davidson for 23 years. And I mean, this man worked until he could not work anymore. Like, I was amazed at his stamina and the fact that he could barely walk but still would go to work. But he finally took early retirement because he just couldn't do it anymore and was getting very, very sick and spent a lot of time in the hospital. October 3rd of 2016, his sugars were all over the place. So because he was diabetic, he usually suffered from a low blood sugar. This time he went into the diabetic, I can never say it.
Ketosis?
Yes.
Ketosis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can say it. Today I cannot. But he didn't want me to call the hospital that night. And at first you can't tell because a lot of the symptoms are low blood sugar too. You don't know. And I was trying to take his sugar and it was going off the chart. It wasn't reading on my monitor. I would try to get him to take something. He didn't want to take anything. He didn't want to go to the hospital. And so he ended up passing out. And when he passed out, I called 911. So it's funny because he had a DNR, but because I called...
What's DNR?
DNR is a do not resuscitate order.
Okay.
So he also did not want to be on life support. He didn't want kidney dialysis. He didn't want any of that stuff. He was very adamant about what he wanted, and he knew that he wasn't going to live a long life because he was so sick. So I ended up sending him to the hospital, and Steph and Jackie both had sat there with me because I had gone to the hospital every other month with him. And we'd sit there and we'd think, oh my God, this is serious. And he'd walk out and we're like, this man just, he's just amazing. He just won't stop. He continues to live, which was good, but it was just amazing. And, so Steph and Jackie were like, Mom, just chill. Just get yourself together, get your bag, do the things you need. You know what's going to happen. Like, you're going to get there. Kenny's going to be fine. So I did. I sat for an hour. Like, I never do that. I sat for an hour. Here he had coded on the way to the hospital. When I get to the hospital, they're like freaking, like, where have you been? And dragging. I'm like, oh my God. Like, the one time I took my time and it was pretty serious. So I didn't know if he was going to live through that night. I actually called his daughter in Connecticut. She drove out. So this was October 3rd. He went to the hospital. October 3rd, my mom in South Carolina went into the hospital. My sister got a hold of me at midnight and told me, Mom's in the hospital, not sure what's going on. I'll keep you posted, because I had been talking to her all evening too, because she finally had a night out. She got somebody to come and sit with my mom because my mom had dementia. So my mom goes to the hospital October 5th. Kenny starts to get a little bit better and starts to stabilize. My mom passes away. So she dies on October 5th. October 12th, Kenny codes again and has to have open heart surgery the same day I'm planning my mom's service. So I'm at the hospital trying to make sure I get him off to surgery and do what I need to do there, running to the church to plan my mom's service, back to the hospital again. And Jackie had relapsed at the same time. So it was...
That's crazy.
2016 was...
Terrible.
It was terrible. The last quarter of 2016 was probably the worst, almost the worst of my life. You know, losing Steph, I think, has topped even 2016. I mean, Kenny was sick. My mom was sick. My aunt had been sick. I mean, you know, it was inevitable for them. It was a shock about Steph. So, but 2016 was tough.
When you think back to that year, like, what do you think about? I don't know, like, how to explain it, but do you think of yourself as a strong person?
Everybody calls me strong, and I have yet to been able to label myself as strong. Like, I guess I am, but just because I'm strong, and I actually said this to somebody the other day. I said, you know, people keep telling me I'm a strong person, but that doesn't mean that I don't have issues.
Right.
And I think that that's what it comes down to. I'm a strong person, but I have issues.
I mean, everybody has issues.
Everybody has issues. And, you know, I see a therapist. I have to see a therapist. I have to be involved in the support groups. You know, my kids call me crazy. You know, I'm psycho. You know?
Do you feel like your mind has to be going constantly?
All the time.
Because if you sit with yourself in a quiet room, you can't deal with it?
All the time. I was telling your mom on the way here, I spent the weekend at the camper. And I spent a lot of time by myself because...
I saw your post on Facebook.
Yeah, it was a rough weekend. It was rough being by myself this weekend. And I'm not sure why. Like, I'm usually okay, but this weekend was a tough one. Maybe I knew I was coming here.
I mean, she
I
experiences...
have bad days, too.
Yeah, you experience the same things. And
people tell me the same thing. You must be so strong, but I do the same thing you do.
Yeah,
I keep
like,
busy, and once I'm down for a while,
yep.
It's like I got to get going. And like I shared with you, this COVID thing has been devastating.
Oh,
Not
it's been
being
horrible.
around people. It just, you have to keep your mind busy. They always joke that I go to the grocery store like 12 times a week just because because I need to go do something and buy something. And when the stores are like they are, it's like, what do you do now? So
I know.
So you're constantly doing things just to keep your mind off of the past, or...
Well, some of that, I think it's just me. You know, I mean, I've always been the type of person that has to stay busy.
Just go.
You know, I'm a very social person. I used to have parties all the time. I had 3 parties a year for years. My parties didn't stop until after my husband passed away. I had one going away, like, let's celebrate Kenny and my mom and my aunt and everybody, a great big party in 2017, and I have not had a party since. And I miss having parties.
We're going to have to start having parties again.
We are going to have to start, you know, I miss that. I would get DJs or have karaoke or get a band or, you know, and just have this full blown out party. And it was, you know, I always had a summer party, and then I had a New Year's Eve party with just close friends. It would just be my husband, me, and then our close friends. And then I would always have a Christmas Eve party, and it would be the entire family. And, you know, I've watched my family dwindle. You know, I've got family members that I don't speak to and haven't spoken to for a number of years, almost 7 years now. You know, I lost my husband. I don't have my mom. I don't have my dad. I don't have my daughter. You know, I don't have her daughters. So I would go from having these Christmas Eve get-togethers with 23, 25 people to lucky to have 4 people in my house. And that's just shocking to me. It's like, what the hell happened to my life? Like what happened?
We just went through that with Dylan getting married, and I'm still struggling. Like, I was thinking everything was good until we started planning that wedding, and I was so happy for Dylan and Tori, but I told them it tore me apart.
Yep.
You two are similar in a lot of ways.
A lot of ways.
So do you feel as though you have, like, Kath says she has more happy days than she does bad days. What's your balance there?
I think I have more happy days, than bad days. Like, I think of what I've lost on a daily basis, you know, because it's in my face, you know,
So
every
you
day.
Think about it every day.
Every single day. Yeah, every day.
I guess it just depends on how deep you think about it.
Yep.
And that depends on your good and bad days.
Yep.
She's helping explain my story to everyone because I've been just struggling with this myself over the past
It's very
year
similar.
or so.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have lost. I don't know if you put a bigger number on loss, but you have lost a lot, and you are a very strong person.
Oh, thank you. Well,
But it's similar with Kath. There's a lot in common there than we're dealing with.
I think we say as you're a strong person because we can't put ourselves in your situation, so we can't relate at all. So our response would be, yeah, you're a strong person just because how you hold yourself, and you can sit here and talk about it.
But I think everybody, when you are faced with something in your life,
Which everybody will be.
Everybody's going to be faced with something, and to whatever level that is, and I just said to Jackie, I just read a story. It's what I did this weekend was I read, and it's called Rethinking Possible, and it's based on a true story, but it was this woman and things that happened in her life, and it wasn't addiction related or anything like that, but it was just, 3 special needs children, and lost her mother and her son in the same day. And then she ended up waking up with a neurological disorder that left her paralyzed for the rest of her life. And, and I'm reading this story, and I'm like, my God, how amazing that she is, that she got through all of this. So I think that whatever you're faced with, you can get through it. You've got choices in this world. You can crumble up and just, live in your depression for the rest of your life, or you can do something with that and you can be productive. And so I try to be productive. I try to, honor Steph by, attending the Gift of Life when they have functions, and, try to promote organ donor, and, I want to honor her life. And, going through losing Steph and then never knowing from one day to the next if Jackie was going to live or die was horrible.
Terrible.
It was horrible because I told her, I said, don't you do this to me again. Do not make me lose another daughter.
You think that put a lot of pressure on her, though?
Oh, yeah, but she was an addict. So, she didn't want it to happen, but she didn't. The addiction took over.
Yeah.
So, because I never want to say they don't care, because they do care. And
That's
I think
tough.
Jackie said that. She was like, well, I didn't care. She did care. Jackie's a very caring person, but she also has the persona of
The facade.
I am this,
But they act like that sometimes. I was at an AA meeting once, and I had a boy stand up and say, I do not want to hurt my mom. I do not want her to have to bury me, but I can't stop this.
Right.
And that was very powerful to me, because here's a boy, a young man who knows he could die from this and knows he doesn't want to hurt his mother, but can't stop. And so that was an eye-opener. I learned that night that these kids they don't want this to happen. Mm-mm. They know it can happen, and they act tough about, I know I'm playing Russian roulette, and they say that, but underneath they are very scared.
They are very scared.
And they just can't bring that out.
They don't want to die. I do think that they get to the point, that it's not that they don't care, but they feel so hopeless. And I think that that's the difference. I don't think it's that, Jackie will use the term, well, I didn't care if I lived or died. I think she just felt hopeless and felt that there was no way out. And so if she died, people would be better off without her. So I don't think she didn't care, but I think she just felt that way.
I agree with that.
I don't think that Steph I think Steph used whatever she used with no idea whatsoever that this was going to be her last day on earth. She had no clue. And I would give anything to turn back the clock to see, what if I would have gotten in the car and went over to the house? What would we have found? Would we have been able to stop this from happening? But coulda, woulda, shoulda. I can't sit around and do that. I would drive myself insane.
Yeah, I think about the same thing sometimes, because I was actually with a girl that night, and it was late at night. I remember him pulling in the driveway, and what if I went down there after I dropped the girl off? Just to check on him and see what's up or anything.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Anything could happen. But do you have any other questions for her?
No, you definitely can't blame yourself. I went there for a while, and then they're going to do what they want. And
Yep.
It's not what they necessarily want. It's the disease kind of too.
yes,
They don't want to do
yeah,
it.
they
Right.
don't want it. Like she just said, they didn't want to do it.
But
I
they
mean,
make a choice, and I always said Kyle made that choice, and he paid with his life, and
Yep.
your daughter paid with her life, and these kids are still making choices.
They are still making choices, and I feel for her 5-year-old son. This is something that, I don't think that he'll ever grow out of it, but that vision is going to be with him. It was interesting, and I want to tell you, like, I listened to the Medium podcast,
Yeah.
and then I had happened to go over to Steph's house. I had run into her boyfriend, and I had Hunter that night, Jackie's little boy, and I needed to kill some time before I went home. So I'd run into Greg, and he said, well, why don't you just come over to my house and kill time? It had only been my second time in Steph's house since she passed away, which is tough. And I didn't really feel a lot of energy when I went in, because he had put pictures away, and it just didn't look like her house.
Right.
It looked like his house now. It didn't look like her house. But I went in, and the boys were upstairs playing, and I was watching them, and I had taken Hunter to the bathroom and had my back to the boys, and I started walking past. They have these steps that go down to the first floor, and I just, like, hours before, finished your podcast, and I'm walking past the steps, and I thought that Jackson, my oldest, had run past the steps. I thought he went down the steps and run past, because I saw this blur, this figure run past the steps. So I hollered down. Now, we're all upstairs, and Greg's on the phone, and I hollered down. I said, Jackson, what are you doing downstairs? And Greg's like, Jackson's in his bedroom. And I walked in the bedroom, and I see both the boys in the room, and I went back to the steps, and I looked down the steps. I'm getting chills again. And I said, Greg, I just saw somebody downstairs. And
wow.
he's like, are you serious? I'm like, I said, you heard me. I thought it was Jackson. Like, if I wouldn't have said anything, I would have been like, okay, I'm seeing things. But I hollered at my grandson thinking he was down there. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, did Steph just, like, run past? I said, it had to be, because I listened to their podcast. Like,
It's
Steph was, like,
possible.
showing herself there in the house.
Yeah.
It was just so odd. But Jackson sees her, and he talks to her a lot.
I've heard stories about younger
Yeah.
kids seeing.
Yeah, kids are very open to that, and he does. He'll say, Mommy saw me. Mommy came and talked to me last night. Or
That put a smile on your face.
it did. It freaked me out at first. Like, I was like, oh my God, like, I don't usually see things like this. So, I hope it was her. I hope she came to visit. I hope she's running around keeping an eye on her son. Because that's what hurts me. I think, I don't want to say the most, but the fact that her son found her is, that hurts me, because that has now affected the rest of his life. Like,
How old was he?
He was 3.
So do you think he remembers?
I think he will remember. I think because
She's with him.
I think
believe
so.
that. Yeah.
I think she is,
He'll
and
be
I
all
think
right.
she's guiding him and helping him along, and but I
It's
just
okay.
hope.
It might have been her. It's weird. Like, even we said with the medium, like, sometimes things happen. I'm like, are you serious? Like,
Yeah.
are you messing with me? And as long as you're open to it, like, I believe, I just told him, this same medium that we went to, he does these weekend things. I don't know that I can do a weekend thing, but he also does these evening things. If you get on his website, I'll give you his name then. But if you get on his website, like, he says how to connect with your spiritual guides.
I want to do that.
And
Yeah,
so you can
I
be our
think
partner.
that's cool.
He wants to do it. I don't know if
Yeah.
he wants to do it or not, but I'm totally going to pay to go see if I can do that, because
Yeah.
like, in the podcast, like, I get these weird things sometimes, and like, I want to be in touch with that. If I have the capability of being able to do that and connect for not just myself but for
Right.
people, like, I want to know.
I want to be able to do that, because sometimes I keep thinking that I must have a block. I'm not getting.
Yeah.
Am I getting signs? I don't feel like I'm getting signs. Is the hummingbird that visits me every single day, is that a sign or is it not a sign? Am I making it a sign? I'm always
Yep.
second guessing everything.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, it's
It's
just
like
it's
you just
tough.
want that door to open up and be like, all right, yeah, this is it.
This is
that.
it. Yep.
Yeah,
And that's
I
what
see
Joe
you're saying.
says. Joe says all the time, how come I don't get signs? And I'm
Yeah.
like, you got to be open.
Well,
He's like, I'm open.
His latest post was something about if you have the ability to connect with, I guess, energy or whatever you want to call it, then you should help the others that can't do it or don't have the ability to do it.
I
So
would
it's
love
kind of
to.
like,
And I think everybody is supposed to be able to have that ability.
Yep.
Steph had that ability from what you were telling me.
Yeah. Oh,
or
she
telling
did.
us.
Yeah.
When you said
definitely did.
that even the tattoos, that's
Yes.
she had that ability to pick up on I don't know, spirits or whatever.
She
you wanna
definitely
call them,
did.
but
She was like, if you had a strange dream and you needed to know what that dream meant, you went to her. Like, she would analyze dreams and she'd be able to tell you what it meant. And she was big into ghosts. She always, she always had the little app on the phone, that you were going to go find ghosts in the house. And, she always had that. She was big into that. She loved Ray Meyer's Hollow. And, so she was very big into hauntings and spirits and just being open like that, so I would be amazed if she wasn't, even if she was angry with me, because sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't think you were mad at me. Like, can you show yourself? Can you give me a sign? Can you do something?
And it comes when you're least expected. When you ask, you don't get. Look, I didn't even ask.
Don't
and
ask
he cursed
too much.
At me.
I know.
Yeah, the other day, I think it was yesterday, I was in my truck and just like, I know that my radio's broken. I talk about that in the podcast, how my radio's broken, but when I turn the dial, it turns stations. Well, for some reason yesterday, when I changed the station, it kept coming back to the same one, even though I kept turning it the same way. I'm like, this is nuts. Like, it did like 8 or 9 times. I'm like, why is this not changing? It just kept going back to the same station.
that was Kyle.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And I'm like you said, is that a sign or is this a sign?
You start wondering,
Yeah.
I say it's all a sign.
I think it has to be a sign. I mean, I do remember when my brother passed away, we were over at my brother and sister-in-law's house, my other brother and sister-in-law, and they had 2 little kids at the time that he had passed away, and they had like these remote control cars and stuff out in the garage. And I remember them saying that these cars kept starting by themselves. They would go out and the car would be moved or they would start. And, she was like, Rob, why are you doing this? Like, what's going on? He's like, I'm not doing it. So I swear it was my brother, that he was showing that he was still there and he was around and he was messing with them. And, so I mean, it's nice to think that they are still here, and still with you. So,
yeah, I remember having this. I don't know if you guys remember the bop it, pull it, twist thing, the little toy thing.
No.
Was it?
It was a pull, twist, bop thing, and it was like a toy thing. So it would say bop, you hit it, and then if it said twist, you would twist a certain thing.
I think I vaguely remember that. Pull. Yeah.
We used to have one when I think it was me and Dylan were still living in the same bedroom. No, we weren't. But there was one in the closet, and one night. This is way back before Kyle even passed, but one night it just all of a sudden started going off. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, it woke me up, and I get up, and I had to dig through the closet to find it. I found it, and I actually needed a screwdriver, and I didn't have one, so I had a pocket knife there, and I remember trying to get it open to take the batteries out because it wouldn't turn off. And I remember I cut my finger wide open, and I had blood all over the door, and I didn't realize it. My dad woke up the next morning, he's like, why is there blood all over the door? No. But, like, I don't know if that was a sign or not, but like, those kind of things are weird to me.
They are weird. Yep.
They make you smile, though. It's when you need it the most sometimes.
I know. Like, I do have a frequent visitor. This hummingbird comes every single morning. And, I know it was before Steph had passed. I actually figured it was my mom or my husband, because the hummingbird would come and visit. And I would see it at the hummingbird feeder. But this one particular time, it like circled around the hummingbird feeder, and then it came right in front of my face, and it just fluttered there for a minute. And I'm like, okay, I'm not sure who you are, but hi. Like, yeah. Because I mean, and that's what I always feel like, okay, they say that you should be able to be open, but who am I open to? Like, who's coming to visit? Because I got so many of them right now. Like, I don't know who it is.
Yeah. Then you try to think back to how you were feeling in that moment so you could do it again. And it's like, really, you don't know when it's coming.
Well, I saw a blue jay today, so I thought of Kyle. I saw a blue jay, and I was like, oh, hi, Kyle.
We're going to talk about you a little bit later. No, well, that's quite the story with Steph, and you are strong. And I know when people tell me I'm strong, sometimes like you have to live up to that. And it's hard sometimes because you just want to yell, like, I'm not strong.
I'm not
like,
as strong as you think I am. Right? Yeah.
But they say God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And so sometimes we question that.
Right.
Because I remember saying to him sometimes, I'm at the edge. Like, I'm ready to fall. Like, don't push me any farther. And I'm
a perfectionist. It's like I want to be perfect at this. Like, I want to be able to handle my life and be spiritual and do this and do that. Like, I want to be able to do a lot, you know, but sometimes I think I take on too much, you know, because of some of the groups and stuff that I'm in. You know, I'm glad that I'm a part of the groups, and I'm glad that I have a Naranon group. I need Naranon. I know we talked about that before a little bit. So for me, I need it. It's something that, it's just a small group. I do it at my house now once a week, and it's been good for me.
Yep.
So
yeah, and now that we know your story, as I shared before the podcast, we want to get some topics, and so we'd like to invite you back with some of those topics. Once we have the story of the people that are involved in the topic, then we don't necessarily have to go to the story, but we can actually deal with the topic, because you're so involved in all these groups, and there's so much help out there that people don't even know where to go, and you can help guide them to where they need to be. Like we learned in the last podcast that there's one rehab in the state of Pennsylvania that helps girls that are fighting addiction that are pregnant. Like, there's so much more that we can do.
We absolutely have to do more. We really do.
And you're going to be able to help us with that, just from what you've learned and what everybody else has learned, to get us one step closer to stop.
I think this is great what you guys are doing. I mean, it's helping me. Like I said, I look forward to Sunday mornings. Like, I'm not even out of bed yet, and it's like, silence a stigma, boom, you know, hit it. So
good, and that's what we want. So you'll be a regular. You have a lot to your story, with one passing and one in addiction today. There's so much for us to learn.
Well, and we'll just take it one day at a time.
Absolutely.
And, you know, hope she continues to do well. And
yeah, I see her posting a lot.
Yeah, she's doing good. I'm proud of her. Yeah. I'm proud of her.
She's beautiful.
Thank you.
You got any questions? I told you to write down some questions.
We answered a lot of them. So I didn't ask some of them because of what was already said.
So you have a better understanding on things?
Yeah.
Yeah, you two are definitely similar in a lot of different ways.
I think I said that to Jackie once before I reached out. I was like, man, I said, I think Kyle's mom and I have a lot in common. Like,
I'm sitting here listening to you, and it's like her.
Yeah.
She's Capricorn, I'm Sagittarius, but
I'm not into that sign stuff.
I don't know what that means either,
I don't know what it means. Jackie's Sagittarius.
Well, we have addictive personalities. I do know that I have an addictive personality, whether it's food or even when I get involved in something, it's 100%.
I guess in some way we all do. You know, we really do.
A friend just told me today I have an addictive personality when it comes to work or whatever I get involved in. I'm focused. I have my blinders on and I'm in.
It's what you're going to call it. Are you going to, I call it that I'm obsessed with something. Well, if you're obsessed with something, then you've got, I know that I'm not going to overdrink, and become an alcoholic, and I'm not going to abuse drugs and do that. But yet I will make sure that I have enough caffeine to get me through the day, and I'll make sure that I overload my schedule so that, I don't have to think about anything, and, and I will constantly do projects in my house so I don't have to think about anything. So it's all kind of addictive.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy though. Like my friend said, like, you don't know how addictive a personality you have. I mean, you could, like you said, we all do, but if you try that drug once, that feeling, that first feeling, you might just want to do it over and over again. That's where these people get caught up into doing these different drugs and stuff like that. But yeah, so you guys good with everything?
Yep. Thank you again.
Thank
Gina.
you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
We'll definitely have you on again.
All right. Sounds great.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll be back next week. See ya.